Thanks everyone for joining us for our Project Lavina webinar. If you've been looking for a fast and easy way to bring 3D production scenes into real time, then you're in the right spot. Project Lavina is an application we've been building at Chaos so you can explore and interact with your scenes all ray traced in real time. I'm Grohs, the head of creative at Chaos. I'm joined by our resident Lavina expert and product manager, Simeon Balabanov. And for the first part of our webinar, Simeon and I will walk you through what Lavina can do, how easy it is to use, and then most importantly, how it can help you visualize your projects in real time. In the second part of our webinar, we're going to hear from our friends at Brick Visual. They're a world-renowned architectural visualization firm. We're joined by Attila Cselovszki, the Chief Development Officer at Brick. Brick's been communicating architecture through high-end visualization since 2012, and they're known for their work on major projects such as architecture firms such as Big, Snøhetta, and SOM, just to name a few. Attila and the team at Brick have been using Lavina since the very early beta, giving Simeon and our team some great feedback. So he's going to share his experience so far with Lavina, how it fits into their workflow. And then I also want to say a really quick thanks to him and the team from Brick for sharing the production scene that we're going to be showing throughout our demo. So let me switch my screen over to Simeon, and he's going to go ahead and get us started on how to bring a scene into Lavina.
Thanks, Lon. This is the scene in 3ds Max. And again, thanks to Attila for providing the scene, and to the team at Brick Visuals. As you can see, this is a quite heavy scene. It's already about 14 millions of polygons, and this is not even counting the vegetation. So yeah, this is the original thing that we're going to be we're going to be importing in Lavina. That of course is not going to be any issue in let me just zoom in. We have a few cameras here. I have selected the first one to be the render camera, and this is important because the way the VR scene file works is that you can only have a single camera at this time, and whenever you export, or whichever camera you export your scene from, this is going to be your home or default camera in Lavina. And this poly count actually won't be any problem for Lavina because it's a fully ray traced render, and it will render all these trees over here, including the more densely populated vegetation over there in front of the house. So I'm not going to export the scene right now, just because it takes some time. But the process is fairly straightforward. You just select VR scene export and set up your options. The one important thing that I should note here is that if you have animation and you would like to see that or include that in the VR scene, you should check the export animation from here, and then you hit export, and this is done. All right, so let's move ahead and import that in Lavina. I have the Lavina opened up here. This is the startup scene that you get every time when you launch Lavina in the beginning. And let's quickly, sorry, I'm just going to drag and drop that. I have it over here. So this is the production scene. Oops. That was 3ds Max. Apologies for that. Too many. And I think that now I made 3ds Max try to load up a VR scene, which it doesn't know what to do.
Yeah, it didn't like that. So
so I might be I might need to kill it just so that we don't waste too much time. But okay.
At least
All
everybody
right.
on the webinar knows that it's a truly live demo, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so now we load the scene in the appropriate application, and as you can see, it loads up relatively quick. This is from a network location, so it takes some time. It might take more time than from your local SSD, for example. And if you pay close attention here to the last statistics here, this is the instance phases, and they will go pretty high, so you can keep an eye on that. The final number that we're getting to would be 580, I believe, or 60 billions of polygons.
That's
So
billion with a B, right?
yeah, that's billion with a B.
Wow.
Maybe
So
I should have.
while that's loading, I'm sure people are going to be wondering, one of the first questions I'll ask is, what kind of hardware are you running this on? Can you tell everybody what's in your system?
Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it, I should have loaded this from the local drive. But anyway, so I'm using NVIDIA GeForce RTX 2080 Ti. This is the graphics card that Lavina is going to be using for rendering, and the CPU is let me pull up my my task manager, and the CPU is i7 3960 at 3.3 gigahertz, and I have 64 GB of RAM. But to speed the process up, of course, I should have loaded this from the local hard drive. However, yeah, 580 billions polygons is the total number in the end. This is including all the trees and yeah, okay. So yeah, apologies for this. I'm just going to quickly. I just realized that I should have done this from the local drive, which I do have. So I'm going to do this really quickly.
Man, no worries.
And just
And while you're doing that, I just want to remind everybody that currently Project Lavina is in beta. So if you're interested at all in trying to check this out for yourself, I'll pull up a link later that'll show you, but you can go to chaosgroup.com/Lavina and download it and give it a try. So I just wanted to let everybody know that it's free to access right now in beta, and you can bring in your scenes, any of your V-Ray scenes, and give it a whirl.
Yeah. And yeah, now it's much faster. It takes just under a minute. And actually, there is also a statistics window that we can check right after the scene has been loaded, but it's noticeably quicker. And yeah, now we should see everything. So the moment Lavina has loaded everything, you get to see it. Now, one thing that I did previously when I exported the scene was that I didn't include the environment map here, and that was on purpose. And the reason for this was that I really wanted to show how you can just simply drag and drop any EXR or HDRI directly in Lavina's viewport, and it's just going to render it out and load it for you. So this makes it much easier to load up any HDRIs that you might want. All right, and I'm also going to quickly set up the exposure here to value, because that was the original intent. This currently is not still yet. This is exposure value, and this is not currently read directly from the VR scene, although it's written there. So it kept the original 20 exposure value stops. So the only thing that I just needed to do was just select either exposure value or a physical exposure, which will rely on the film speed and f-number and shutter speed as an alternative. But I'm going to just use the exposure value here. Okay, let's check the statistics real quick. And this was on my other screen. So 52.28 seconds for the whole scene. All right. Let's.
So now that you've got it loaded in there, Simeon, how can you navigate around? How can you move around the scene?
Right. Okay. Well, it's actually very easy. We've included a couple of DCC mode navigations, and also one more intuitive or more inherent to real-time applications such as game engines. So the game engine one is to when you hold down the right mouse button, and then you're able to use the WASD keys on the keyboard to walk around. This is intended for first-person mode. You can also press the Shift button to speed up temporarily the movement speed. And this mode actually is bound to the full screen mode that can be activated from here. The free look, it has a shortcut of the tilde key. So if you do this, you can see that we go in full screen. And one other option I should mention is the fill option, which will make sure that whenever you're in full screen, the window is filling up every space that you might want to do. To use. The alternative mode would be a DCC mode, and I'm currently using a Maya based preset, but which works with the alt left mouse button to orbit, middle mouse button to pan, and right mouse button to zoom. All these with alt, but you can go to the preferences and go into the interaction and choose different preset such as 3ds Max and SketchUp, and let's actually go ahead and use the 3ds Max now. Here is also the mouse sensitivity, which is an important parameter when you might want to tweak if you want to speed up your mouse or slow down your mouse for when you want to find the perfect or fine tune the mouse. So now it's 3ds Max, which is just a simple just middle mouse button panning, alt and mouse button, middle mouse button orbit, and then control alt and middle mouse button to zoom, or the scroller to zoom, just like in 3ds Max.
So I can see as you're orbiting around there, one of the things that we talk about for Lavina is its ability to bring in all of this amount of geometry without any optimizations, without having to go through any hoops to bring it in. Can you show somebody, maybe zoom in down into the grass or any one of those trees, just to show how much detail is actually in this scene?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go further down in the grass and just observe all the polygons here. And I'm currently lost, but but we can just let me actually increase the movement speed here, because this is a field and it will be much easier to navigate like so. Okay, so this whole here is different types of grass, and there are some artifacts from the denoiser because the movement is really quickly. But if I do a bit slower movement, you can see everything here. And if I go upwards, you can see a lot of trees. And actually, I'm going to speed up my camera even more and just navigate through all the trees and then go here and dig deeper. Actually, if you have a look, if you pay close attention, the trees currently are using planes and opacity maps. And currently Lavina hasn't enabled those, but we can do this really quickly by using this option here, opacity maps, and now the trees look as they should. Oops, I don't know where I went. So I'm just going to turn back and head over to the house. Oops, I should have set up a camera, so I'll be using the home camera to go back quickly. And just the one thing I need to do is revert back the exposure. So let's set up a camera here with the proper exposure. Actually, if you noticed, once I enabled the opacity clip mode, it actually slowed down the frame rate a little bit, and this is because opacity is actually tracing geometry as well. It's just disregarding the parts of the poly that are not visible, but still this affects performance. So if possible, I would always suggest having a geometry cutout tree, but in this case, of course, we do have opacity map, so we can't get away with it. And this is a good opportunity for me to showcase or to run you through the interface. In cases where you would like to increase the performance, one of the things that you could do really quickly is change the resolution, and this is why this is the first thing that we have in here. These are the preset of the resolution, so I'm just going to quickly switch it down to a bit smaller resolution to get faster frame rate. And now I'm not sure if this is visible very well from the streaming from the webinar, but Lavina is keeping about 30 frames per second. It's much more responsive and much more enjoyable. So yeah, and then if we move down, here we have things like aspect ratio, the fill button I already showed. We have also a collision button, which makes Lavina trace collisions so that you don't fall through floors or or you can bump in walls, for example. And to demonstrate that, I'm just going to go quickly inside of or maybe around the house. And let's actually slow down the movement, enable the collision, and go into full screen. And as you can see now, even if I want to go through the wall, Lavina will not let me, and because collisions are enabled. And I can disable them temporarily by pressing the C key, go through, and enable it again by pressing the C key again. And let's climb on top of these stairs. Okay, so now I can also climb stairs. So getting out of the first-person mode, let's go back to the original camera. We also have a few other options, such as the manipulation coordinate system, selection tool, movement, or all the transformation tools here. We also have an option to pick up the camera focus and various manipulation options for changing temporarily the pivot point of an object. For example, if I want to select this tree, I can just change its pivot to over here and then manipulate along this pivot. Of course, I wouldn't want to do that, so let's revert that. Finally, we also have options to change the navigation around the cursor hit or the target selection. And again, if you remember, I mentioned changing the sensitivity if you want to find this perfect shot. Currently, I might find that the orbiting around the house is very strong or very fast. So what I can do is just say, okay, let's navigate around selection, select the house, so that now I'm orbiting right. Oops. So that I'm orbiting right around this house or the window, and then because this is very fast, I might be I can just press this button over here, which will increase the sensitivity or decrease the speed of the mouse and allow me to fine tune this perfect angle that I'm looking for. So this is a very neat option to have in mind. The rest of the interface is the things that you might want to do with the scene, or the way to interact with the scene. You can see those tabs here on the right and the left. We have render settings, post-production settings, camera settings. I already showed a couple of those, and also things that you can do with your scene. Let me just move the GoToWebinar thing out of the way. We have the lights section, which allows, as you see, assigning different, for example, HDRIs. For example, I can use this one. These are the recent ones that I used, and this guy doesn't have too much of intensity, so let's bump it up and see. Okay, this is more of a night sky. And quickly go back to the original one, and because currently this is using 10, let's bring it back to 1. Change the rotation of the HDRI and see it affect the image-based lighting at real time. And also do all kinds of different things with the lights. For example, globally enabling all the lights, and the environment currently is not treated as a dome light. This is a little bit different than in 3ds Max. Lavina always has an environment that uses as a image-based lighting, and the idea here is to save or to remove some clutter from the interface, so we combine the environment together with the dome light here. And if you want to do to have a different environment, you can do so from here as well. We also have the option to use a physical sky, by the way, which is the procedural sky that Viri generates. We'll have a look at this in just a minute. I just want to finish with the overview of the interface. So this is the setting for all the lights that you have in the scene. You can think of this as a light lister in a way. We have a material lister, which allows a very basic functionality to select object by material and assign different materials to different objects. And also an outliner, object outliner, which allows you to toggle visibility of different objects or select from the list actually. So for example, if I select this guy over here, hide it, and yeah, it's gone. So yeah, so that would cover the basic functionality. The last thing I didn't mention is the status bar here at the bottom, but we saw it in action in the beginning. And also it shows a little bit status information. A cool feature is also that if you hover, the tooltip will show you the number of accumulated samples and the performance of your machine or of your workstation.
So let's say I wanted to take a snapshot of what this is and send it to somebody. How can I do that in Lavina?
Right. Well, it's fairly straightforward. Actually, we have a few options to do that. You can immediately take a screenshot of exactly what you're seeing and what it looks like with the current quality by pressing this button over here. It's a quick save snapshot, and it's going to pop up directly in the folder where the image is. Here it is. This is the image that I just captured. Or alternatively, you can also press the render high quality snapshot, which will pop up, will prompt you for a resolution that you want and amount of samples that you might want to allow for Lavina to, or you can think of this as quality, and then hit start, and it will render out for the amount of samples that you want it to.
And then what about something like an animation? Can you export an animation or create that out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I was saving this for a bit later, so I didn't show that part in the interface. But creating animations is very straightforward with the addition of the time editor or timeline editor that we did just a version back, and actually you can think of animating with Lavina in two ways. The first, or as a two-step process, and the first, I really promote users thinking in this, that Lavina is a 3D viewer first, or scene explorer, and you can just go around and as I just did, increase a little bit the sensitivity, or sorry, the speed, and find out really nice, interesting looking angles of your scene, and set up multiple cameras by creating camera snapshots or viewpoints or camera presets in this list over here. So I did one other. Let's make a really nice top view, which will start from here. We can see all the nice trees, and also I would like to see the skyline because I might change the illumination here later on. So store this as a map, and then let's actually make it a slow panning shot, and right like so. Create yet another camera. So I'm not going to overdo this. We have just the two different transitions, or actually they're going to become three. So now a really useful thing of Lavina is being able to present this first, to yourself. Try this for yourself, or maybe at the customer, without even the need to make animations. So if you see here the F numbers here, these are the keyboards on the key bindings on the keyboard. So if I press F1, F2, and F3, I'm going to switch between these cameras. But you can also just simply click, and Lavina is going to do a transition. I'm pretty sure that GoToWebinar is stripping up the smooth transition. So I'm just pointing out that currently Lavina makes a smooth transition between these cameras. Whenever I click single. Or single click with the left mouse button. If I double click, Lavina will teleport directly to the camera. So this is a quick way for you to validate the cameras and the animations that you want to achieve. And once you're happy with that, you can just pull up the editor. And as I said, you can just use the hotkeys as well if you want to use your both of your hands to navigate. But for the timeline editor, there are a couple of interesting options here. The first one is if you have exported animation within the VR scene, it will be baked into this green layer, the scene animation, and you can toggle on and off a layer by pressing those red rectangles in front of them. And the camera animation layer is intended for you to drag and drop camera presets or camera clips from here, stack them over here, and make animations, much like a video editing application. Now, one important thing to note here is that the default location here is, the default duration that we'll have for a clip will be 2 seconds. And we also have a snapping, which I'm going to set to, let's say I'm going to snap at 10 seconds, or actually, no, a bit lower, 5, sorry, not seconds, but 5 frames. So 5 frames. I'm going to switch back to time, which, so 5 frames is about 0.28 seconds. All right, so let's do a real quick animation, dragging the first camera now. And I'm going to drag yet a second one here at the end. And since I don't see them, I'm just going to Alt scroll down on the with my cursor on top of the timeline to zoom out and see both of the clips here. And currently, if I place my cursor at the bottom here with the time markers and scrub, it's going to scrub the timeline. And currently, I just have a stepped interpolation, or no interpolation between the two cameras, and Lavina just quickly switches from one camera to the other. This is useful if you want to make a sharp cut, but this is not the case. So I would like to have a transition, and I'm just going to simply right-click and say Add Transition After, because I clicked on the left, but I could also click on the right and say Add Transition Before. Zoom out again, and currently we have a 2-minute linear transition, 2-second linear transition between these two clips. Again, not sure if GoToWebinar displays smoothly, so I'm just going to scrub it really slow so that you can see the type of the animation. And I'm doing this because this is currently a linear animation, and it's going to start somewhat abruptly from one camera and stop somewhat abruptly. In other words, there is no easing. So if I want to apply easing, I can right click on the transition, and I have several options here to choose from, in easing, out easing, or both. So I'm just going to select both, and now the transition is going to start really smooth using quadratic interpolation for the more technical savvy from our viewers, and end with an easing out, which makes it really nice, a real nice animation. Then moving on, I'm going to drag the third camera here, zoom out, and since this is a complete change of the angle, I'm going to use this as an abrupt or a step transition, so no change here. And I'm just going to drag the fourth camera again, zoom out, right click, add transition after, and keep it linear in this way, because I would like to get a nice panning shot, smooth panning shot with a linear transition. But what I would like to achieve is currently the camera trick clip has a length of about 2 seconds. So I don't want to do this. I want to make it just a keyframe. So I will right click here and say make transient. And this will make it orange and really tiny, which means that the moment we switch to this camera, the transition starts. And we have a nice transition from one camera to the other. And I can also make this transient as well. So now when I play, my whole total animation is going to start smoothly from here and then stay a little bit there and then cut to the other shot and use a linear transition. Now, to me, it was a bit fast, so I can change the duration of some of the clips like so. And I'll leave it up to the beta testers to experiment with all the settings here that we have. Just wanted to give a quick overview of all the functionality that we can. To finish off, I'm just going to show how you can render the quality sequence, the high quality sequence, or the sequence from here, and you decide if it's going to be a higher quality or a lower quality. By using a couple of options here that we will take a look at later, but the first one would be the number of samples here, and Lavina and the resolution, of course. And Lavina is going to render the whole sequence here to a sequence of frames on your hard drive. Okay, I think I have a little bit of time to just quickly mention the other quality settings that we are also added in the last version of Lavina, and that's located in the render settings, and that's the noise threshold. The noise threshold actually introduces adaptive sampling, which means that some pixels are going to be sampled more or rendered with higher quality, while others that do not need it, such as the background or flat surfaces, will not be, Lavina will not spend too much time rendering those. So I'm just going to use something like 0.1 and show an active overlay here. Yeah, I think it's, currently I'm seeing somewhat of a well, blinky effect, or sorry. So I'm going to quickly stop it, but just you can see that some of the black pixels appear more and more. I think this is because I'm sharing my screen and something with the DirectX overlay is being shown, but I'm just going to turn it off very occasionally to showcase that the white pixels are less and less. And by the way, with this you can see the frame rate is becoming higher and higher because less and less pixels are being sampled from Lavina. And this is actually a quality and speed setting that you can use, and it works on the static frame currently, and also with the high frame rate sequence rendering as well. So make sure that you use this one when you're doing these renders.
So, Simeon, on the right-hand side of your scene, you've got lights, materials, and objects. Can you walk us through sort of what you can do with those, starting with lights, maybe?
Yeah, okay. Thanks for that. Actually, it was It was something that I wanted to talk about, but somehow got carried away. And I think I mentioned a few of the options here for the dome light, so I'm not going to cover this as well again. We saw that in action. But what I can show here is a real quick way to change the overall look of the scene. For example, let's use the physical sky here, and I'm going to switch that. Of course, it changes the reflection because the environment now is something different, obviously. And then here down at the bottom, we have the light lister. The first thing that you might want that you might see, or at least I'm currently looking at, is the grouped label here. Lavina supports instance lights now, and because we have 4 lights in the interior of the house which have been instanced, we Lavina grouped them. But I'm not interested in those lights yet. We're going to take a look at them in a bit. We also have the sunlight, and if you have more lights, all of those are going to be right over here. So let's actually close the timeline editor to give me more space. And we have modes of this animation, sorry, of this light lister. It can be compact with the very, very bare minimum of settings that you might want to do and might want to use. For example, the intensity of some of the lights, the on and off, the intensity, and the color of the lights. We were looking at the basic one, but you also have advanced, which exposes all the parameters that are supported, and you can change through all the lights. So I'm going to go back to the basic ones again and switch the sky model to be the new one that was introduced in V-Ray 5, the improved one, which handles sun below the horizon much better and makes the sky well, actually quite beautiful. And to change the sky, I might you have 2 ways of doing that. You can go to the Objects tab and go and find the sunlight here and manipulate it using the rotation tool. But since this is very cumbersome, we've added a special control for the sun based on altitude and azimuth, and I'm going to switch to that and use the degrees settings here, the 2 degrees settings, which allow me to make the sun upper or lower in the atmosphere, and the azimuth changes the north rotation, if you will. Okay, so I'm going to adjust that so that we can see a lot of illumination coming right in front of the house. Okay, and by the way, I'm going to lower the exposure a bit so that we can see the sky. Change the azimuth again so that I position the sun right beautifully. Let's pick this tree over here to the left. All right, and as you can see, if I just bump down my exposure, and this, by the way, is the preview exposure, not the camera exposure. So if I right click on the spinner, I'm going to go back directly to the default setting, which is what the camera sequencer is going to render out. And now we have a beautiful sunset. All right. But what I want to achieve actually is go even below the horizon. So go even low. And now, as you can see, there is some illumination now, but because I lowered the exposure, we can't see anything. So I'm just going to reset this. And you can see the beautiful, somewhat violet colors that we get when the sun goes below the horizon. And to make the scene more nice, more friendly to the viewers out there, I'm just going to lower the exposure as a whole, and just as a real photographer or actual photographer is going to do. So let's use something like an 8 or maybe even 6, so that everything is really, really bright. Actually 7, and lower the sky even more. Okay. Adjust the exposure once more. So maybe 5 or 6. I'm just going to slide it, not stick to a specific f-stop. Okay, and now we have a somewhat overexposed night shot, which would work really nice with our nighttime shot. With our lights turned on. And because there are some lights in here, I'm just going to move to try and have a look at those. Okay, because I know where they're located there at this part of the house. We still don't see them because it's quite dark, and their intensity is somewhat lower for this exposure. So let's try increasing that a few times. Okay, this is a point light source, so the intensity here is not physically accurate, or yeah, we should have used an area light, but either way, we can just bump this really high. And now we have somewhat of a night shot prepared. Let's compare that with the original camera. Oops. Because I didn't store my exposure, I'm just going to bring it back again. And by the way, because the exposure values are saved in these camera slots, you can make animation for different exposure as well. That would get included in the timeline. But here is a neat trick. I want to change now this camera here to update it with the new exposure that I just set for this shot. And I can just do that by by pressing this button here. That will override this particular camera position with these particular exposure settings. And to strengthen the effect of this camera here, or sorry, of this effect of the nighttime, I can go and make it a bit colder on the white balance. And finally, in the post, I might lower down a bit the highlight burn so that this area here does not get overexposed. And yeah, we're kind of there lighting wise.
So Simeon, while you're in here, right, you can adjust some of the tone mapping of your image, and I also see a place where you can load a LUT file. Can you talk a little bit about, how you can bring in a lookup table?
Yeah, sure. That actually is something I was going to talk about a bit later on, because it's like a final touch. But let's go ahead and do this now, since you asked. Yeah, absolutely. The LUT, sorry, the post process tab here only manipulates, if you will, the pixels after they have been rendered. Well, naturally, it's called post after all. But the highlight burn is a feature often used when you're when you're doing this type of shots where you have a very bright light source and somewhat darker areas in the image. And obviously, the combination of this would be to even increase the exposure even more, and then use the highlight burn more aggressively to bring back the highlights here. But alternatively, because this washes away a little bit the contrast and the saturation of the colors of the midground, or the mid colors, the mid-range colors, apologies for that, we can compensate for this using somewhat of a LUT. I have a pretty vast collection of LUTs here. Some are black and white, but some are also colorized, and you can actually, as you saw, just click on this blue label here, and Lavina will automatically preview all the LUTs that you have. Lavina also ships with some built-in color LUTs, such as the filmic, the default filmic behavior, warming filmic, and cooling as well, and some other more creative, which we've included. But I'm going to pick some of my vast collection of LUTs here and make the decision while I'm just scrubbing. I'm not sure, again, if the responsiveness of the webinar is good enough to show, but the change is instantaneous, and I can have even more and even more. And I'm just going to stop browsing until I find some that I just like. Probably this one here, to saturate the greens a bit more, and lower the exposure again. Sorry, increase the exposure a bit more so that I can see the middle colors a bit more. Yeah.
Great, thanks for that.
Okay, but this again increase the. Okay, so I'm getting here to the point where the highlight burn is actually washing all the contrast away. So I'm just going to bring this back and live with the fact that you can't have both best of both worlds, overly properly exposed dark and bright spots in the same picture, or it's very, very difficult to achieve. So I'm just going to bring this back a bit, and it also actually feels more natural when you bring the contrast back, at least to me. Of course, one thing that I might do here in this case is cheat a little bit and lower the intensity of the sun, because I like the position here, but I can lower the intensity of the sun just a tad, so that I can bring back the exposure again, and this will bring up the mid ground or the mid range colors again. But again, now this is coming out of the photorealistic realm. For photorealistic sky model, you should keep this at 1. Alternatively, one thing that I wanted to also mention is because currently we set up everything according to this shot, but if I store this over here and go back to, for example, this shot that was originally set, now the illumination is very, very dark because first I changed the intensity and I also changed the horizon. But we can quickly do somewhat of experiments for light studies, and if I lower this down a bit, we can really quickly examine how the shadows of the trees are going to affect our shot by just sliding those spinners and make creative decisions actually on the fly, because everything is updated in real time. And also you can rely on this because, as I mentioned a few times, Lavina is fully ray traced, and there is no cached solutions or baked shadow maps or anything. We just see, you get what you see. So it's a 2-in-1, finding the proper camera, but also exploring your scene and finding the proper illumination.
So Simeon, we got a couple of questions in the chat. People wanted to know if you can swap materials in there. Is there anything you can do with materials?
Yeah, I see, and this is a very, very valid question. So thanks for that. Currently, the way you do this is somewhat limited, but you can also you can do that. You can only work with the materials that were included in the VR scene. So let's get this V-Ray wood, for example, and I don't know, go and get some object here that we want to apply wood to. And currently, I'm just going to change my field of view a little bit, because in the interior, it's better to have somewhat broader, right? Okay, and currently in interior settings, the exposure should be somewhat brighter. And this LUT currently doesn't work for that. So I'm just going to reset those guys and turn off the LUT because it doesn't work in this interior shot at this point. Okay, so swapping materials, let's go to the selection mode here and then select, for example, this wall. And since I have this this V-Ray material, sorry, V-Ray wood selected, I can just say assign selection. Assign this material to selection, and now this material has been changed. Now I'm not sure if the UVs or the tiling of this material was properly applied, so it wouldn't work in this particular case. But I could have done, but I can just select a different material and apply that. So let's give this a try. Aluminum clean, assign, and yeah, now we have a very metallic shader here to this wall. It actually feels very modernistic, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Right.
And looks like we also have a question, Simeon, about bringing objects in or moving them around once you're inside. What can you do with sort of objects in Lavina?
Okay, I saw this question coming, so I've prepared a little bit of an Easter egg, if you will. or a fun part. So I'm just going to go outside here for this demo. So find a more interesting place on the field here. Yeah, we can see an object that casts proper shadow. But anyway, so what I'm going to do is actually go back to my previous location from the server, because I had prepared a football here from Maya. Maya has this generic object, procedural object, which is football. And I'm just going to drag and drop it. And as you can see, this tiny red arrow here appears, which shows the normal of the face that my cursor is currently showing or pointing at. And this will orient the newly imported VR scene along this normal. So you can snap actually objects. Of course, currently we have grass, so it wouldn't make sense to pick something like this one. But if you want to place, for example, a chair here on the porch, or a wall, or painting on the wall here, you could do so like this. And then once I release the button, the left mouse button, you can either open or just merge the scene. And I'm just going to merge it. So loading that. And well, I don't want the football there, so I'm just going to place it somewhere near my camera. Okay, and there we go. We have a football in the grass, and I can press the Z key to zoom in, and again make sure that I'm using the round selection, because I'm going to select the ball and orient. Okay, yeah, I think this is a very good location, to be honest, for this ball, a bit upwards, and yeah, we can leave it here. Oops. Currently, I have way too much perspective, which I don't like. So bring this back to somewhat of a I don't know, 50. And one thing that we can do now is actually again press the Z button to zoom extents on the ball, and now adjust my camera, and oops. And now adjust my camera. By the way, when you're in 3ds Max, you have a hotkey. By holding the Alt and right mouse button will change the field of view, which is easier to navigate this from to transition between exterior and interior shots. Much nicer. But for this option here, I'm just going to go for a depth of field setup here, and I'm just going to enable this guy. I can increase that by lowering the F number quite a lot, and then I can pick up my focus point by using the tool here on the toolbar, pick focus point tool, and then click on the football to bring this in focus, or alternatively select, for example, the background and bring everything here in the bokeh, and yeah. So it's as simple as that.
So you brought in that object. It was a VR scene file that you had exported out of Maya. We've got a couple of SketchUp users that were asking in the webinar, and some Rhino users as well. Can you bring V-Ray scene files in from whichever application you're running?
Yes, absolutely. The majority of V-Ray scenes will be supported depending on what type of effects you have, or features you have used in these scenes. Some of them might not be supported. For example, all these materials currently that we support are the Power V-Ray shader, the VR material, the V-Ray material. I was using the Power V-Ray shader. Imagine what version of V-Ray I was thinking. That was the first versions of V-Ray, so apologies for that. The regular standard V-Ray material, which is capable of reproducing the majority of materials around us in reality, is supported. We will also add support for the updated version of this material with V-Ray 5, including clear coat and sheen, and this will be your Swiss Army knife, so to speak, of setting up materials for Lavina. Every other material will be approximated in some way, so it will not showcase the full effect that have. For example, the two-sided thin translucency material is not going to transfer light at this point. Of course, this is going to be added at some point in the future, but currently it doesn't. And for example, subsurface scatter and skin materials do not scatter light, and so on. But in generally, scenes from any V-Ray integration, or our goal is to keep this, scenes from any integration of V-Ray should be transferable to Lavina without major issues.
So maybe we have time for one more piece of the puzzle here, and that is we've got some folks that want to know, okay, you've brought this into Lavina, you've maybe rendered out some previs animation, you've moved around it in real time, but maybe you've set up some views or some lighting that you like. Can you get that back into 3ds Max at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. I see where this is going, and and I actually showed this a few sorry about this. I showed this in a video previously, because this is a very new and experimental feature that we've developed. And this, so there is a way to get your animation back in 3ds Max, and also not only animation but all the saved camera presets or camera slots back. And I'm quickly going to show that. It's done via something called a VRDX file, or a configuration file, which you need to save from the file menu here. So I'm just going to let's just go back and really quickly scroll through the animation here to remind us where this was going. Okay. So this was our animation starting from the first camera, and then a linear transition between the other two. So file, save config as, and then oops, I do have I do have a few configurations here. Let's pick up the desktop really quickly and say let's say test 01, save this. Okay, and now all the changes that I did in Lavina, and not only, and these include camera presets, the animation, but also the changes that I did to the lights, to the assigned materials, the camera as well. These are included in this VRDX configuration file. And I'm going to launch up 3ds Max. So while this is loading, I want to mention also a neat way to use the VRDX files if you wish. So for example, I might just delete this camera from here, and now I change this configuration. But if I really quickly go and say open scene config, you can restore the configuration really quickly, as you can see. So the animation is stored there, and you can make variations of your scene. And a really cool way to utilize the VRDXs is to save different variations of your scene and just quickly load them up. Because Lavina will not reload the whole scene again, it's already in the memory. It's just going to update the state of the scene that was recorded in the VRDX scene. So this is a cool way that you should that you can use the VRDX files. It's a bit more technical, I realize that, but it does the job. And I'm not going to open the scene once more because it is going to load some time. I'm just going to showcase the script that we had. It's just going to be. Let me just try quickly and load this up. I had it prepared, but since 3ds Max crashed, it didn't save it. So apologies for that. But the script here is just a macro script, which I'm just going to drag and drop, and then really quickly customize the script. It's located in the V-Ray section, and it's called import changes from Project Lavina. Just going to drag and drop it. I'm going to steal some screen space from the Rail clone toolbar. So it looks like that. Okay, and it allows you to import cameras, animated cameras, and override the existing ones if you have any. So it says, oh, I need V-Ray. Oops, didn't install the proper script. Sorry about this, guys. I should have dragged the MZP file. Do that again. Come on. So let's disable this really quickly. And it's the MZP file that I needed to drag and drop, not the macro file. Come on, Simeon, Mac script 101. And drag this here, run it, open it up. All right, I don't know what's going on here. Maybe I haven't. Okay. So as I said, this is an experimental feature. So the script is open, and yeah, maybe this is because I'm using 2021. And last time I checked, this was on 2020. So we need to investigate and import this and improve the script right now. So apologies for this. It's a live webinar, and
and it's
I wasn't prepared.
And it's beta software too, so we're really kind of living on the edge.
Yeah. And also the script is again open to anyone. So if you, since this is something that we're developing kind of on the side while we have a more permanent solution to this functionality, you can either give us a shout out in the forums that we need to fix it, or if you're tech savvy with the Mac script, you can just fix it yourself. It's a very small piece of code. So yeah, there are multiple options. But again, this is a good time for me to mention that if you do have the some problems with the Mac script, do let us know. Because we would really love to or any other issues, of course. As you said, this is a beta software. We are is constantly under development, and we would really like to make it as useful to our users as possible.
Great, Simeon, thank you for walking us through that demo. It's awesome to see how easy it is for you to bring in a scene and start to explore that in real time. I think it's probably a good time for us to check in and switch gears, go over to Attila. I know we're running a little bit late. We were pretty thorough with the demo, but stick around. We're going to answer some of your questions at the very end. So let me switch back over to me really quick. Thanks, Attila, for joining us here. I know that you guys have been working with Lavina since sort of the earliest beta, and I was curious what sort of got you interested in it, and why Lavina for Previs, say, instead of Max.
Yeah, basically it's about how to explore a scene in a good quality. So referring what Simeon said. It's a great scene explorer, and why is it important to see the big picture? We have to understand the fact that there is a paradigm shift in the ArchViz nowadays, because it started with geeks with architectural background who's wanted to show buildings in a new way using cool techniques and cool PC stuff. But right now, ArchViz is much more like an applied art when these applied artists are mediating between architects and the public. And this is a completely new way of thinking. You have to have a more streamlined workflow. How can you achieve a good story? And the ArchViz guys are storytellers, virtual photographers. And the funny thing is, or the silly thing is nowadays, that these virtual photographers are sitting in front of their monitors and checking a 2D representation of a 3D building throughout a viewport in a shaded way or something like that. Okay, right now the new Max has a very brilliant viewport, but let's be honest, we very much need of a tool which allows us to look around in our scenes and having an immediate high quality representation of the scene and being able to make decisions. And at Brick, we have more than 70 people. It's a big organization, and we are always searching for solutions to step forward. We have to raise the bar, we have to increase the quality and increase the efficiency of the production pipeline. Therefore, we are always searching for solutions which helps us in a way like this. And a couple of years ago, Lavina appeared, and that time I was sure that this is gonna be some very good stuff. So I was curious how it goes, and that's why we started to test it.
And in that time that you guys have been sort of working with it and experimenting with in your pipeline, is there anything that's sort of surprised you about it?
Yes, of course. Basically, I was very much curious about this fluent workflow, because what we have right now, we are working with architects and we are getting huge files, most probably a huge Rhino file. And when we export this Rhino file, we've got billions of polygons from the curved buildings of Zaha Hadid. And to work with these files is a challenge. And I was curious, how can Lavina handle it? And it fulfills its promise. That's the best news for me, because our workflow is to have some preparation, some pre-work on these files, and we just put it inside Lavina and being able to look around. And this is a huge advantage. To make it clear what's going on, we are working in a way that that we have to produce a lot of nice draft previews in the early phase of the projects. So, but there is an intensive period in the very beginning of the project when we have to make these kind of decisions, a series of drafts, and we start to communicate with the client through these draft previews. And game engine, all game engines are great for if you have time and money for tweaking with all the details, all the setups, all the back and forth. Even we have data smiths and so on. It's a struggle, and this doesn't fit into this phase when we have to produce these quick drafts. And that's what the first surprise, that Lavina is able to handle this in a quick and efficient way. The other thing is that I have to mention is the quality. Actually, I was very much surprised, and I congratulate Simeon in this webinar, because the file that we've provided is absolutely prepared for Sun setup, and that was unintentional. It was a mistake that we've left some point lights inside it. But Simeon was able to tweak the light settings in a way very quickly that he was able to create a very good night shot, which is good enough for a sketch, and that's what we need, that speed and quality in the same time. So there is a trade-off in the quality. Of course, it's understandable, but I was surprised on this.
I know you guys at Brick also sort of, you develop your own software like Pulse Scene Manager, and maybe you could tell people about it and also sort of how you've adapted it to work in your pipeline with Lavina.
Yes. Okay, so for that, I swap to the shared screen right now. So if 3D Studio Max is visible right now, I hope it is.
You're good. Yep.
Okay. Then please let me show how it works. So yeah, again, before I just showcase what we have over here and how we integrated it into the Lavina, I just wanted to highlight the fact that what we are talking about here in the first place is this previs phase, when we would like to have a series of images about the project. And for that, we use Scene Manager heavily in our studio, which is created for that purpose. So whenever we start a project, we've just put many cameras into the scene and use Scene Manager, which is kind of a scene organizer, which allows you to assign lights and aspect ratios, outputs, whatsoever to your scene. So kind of a replacement of the scene states in 3D Studio Max, but in a way that it's intuitive and gives you a visual feedback, which is very much important to be able to understand what's going on. And that was the moment when Lavina came into the picture, because Lavina is good for that, exactly for that, and fulfill these requirements of ours. So we just wanted to have a connection between Lavina and 3D Studio Max, and also that was the point when we started to work together with Simeon, because you guys are also implementing this, and I swear that the script which was showed working perfectly. So and it's very much okay. So it's just a case of the live demo. But what we have over here, we have a scene with different camera angles, and I just want to make a connection between this scene and between the Lavina scene over here. And for that, I just have to I skipped the step when I saved out the V-Ray scene file. So I loaded in the V-Ray scene file, and here we are. We have it in Lavina, and right now, as Simeon suggested, we just have to save a config file, and once we save the config file, let's say something like this, I can swap back over here and say that there is a config file which can be loaded in, which is done, and since I have 3 cameras over here, I can save the changes of the shot. And if I change the save the changes, I can see that I have 3 cameras that can be imported to Lavina. So right now, if I go back to Lavina and I say that open the scene config file, which is the new one, then it creates the cameras for me that I have. The only issue is over here that I have to turn on the physical light. So as you can see, here I have these camera angles, and I have the animation of the nice Kalachava building. Of course, this is just a Lego version of the Kalachava building created by András Vida, one of my fellow colleagues in Brick Visual. So now I have the connection between Max and Lavina. I'm able to do changes such as Simeon that made it. So let's say that I have a light source over here, which is invisible for camera, but I just want to light up the back of this and change the settings. So let's say that it should be much brighter, or the color should be a little bit bluer. In this way, I made changes on my scene, so I just have to save the scene config file, and once I saved it, I just have to apply the changes, which means that, as you can see over here, our lights position is changed, the intensity is changed, or the color is changed, and that's how it goes. So this was the way how we wanted to create a connection and being able to continue the draft work in 3D Studio Max. So right now, if I'm just create a new view for myself and saying that, okay, that's my new camera, then I can easily save the config file. And if I'm coming back over here and reload it, then there will be a new camera. So I can apply the changes. So my new camera is appeared over here. And for being able to have it in my list, I just create a setup from every camera, and now I have the fourth camera as well. So this is that was the way how how we've been working on it. And of course, this is also a beta, so it's we developing together with you guys, and we just wanted to maintain a fluent continuity between the Lavina and between the work after in 3D Studio Max.
Thanks, Attila, for sharing that. I mean, obviously, that's one of the big keys to this is that fluid transfer of information back and forth, and that's something that you're working on, and we're also working on together. And you know, it's definitely something to keep an eye out in the future to see how Lavina you know, continues to improve. What are some of the things that you kind of think of when you think of Lavina in the future? What are some ideas that you have?
Yeah, it's an inspiring thing to think about Lavina, and we have nice discussions about the in-house as well, and with the guys on your end, because please let me get back where I started with the paradigm shift of our profession. So it's kind of a silly that we are checking all of these things and all of these images in 2D, and what we are missing over here is to being able to walk around and understanding the real spatial relations between the masses. And yeah, here comes the VR into the picture. So the problem is that we wanted to push VR in a way that we wanted to use it for creating a beautiful end product. But I believe that it's much more capable to aid the production itself. So seeing Lavina, I can imagine a kind of a tool which allows the artists over here to walk around in the scene in 3D and having an understanding about the building and finding even better point of views, even better stories. Of course, this won't happen tomorrow, I clearly understand, but this is something which can be an ideal tool for a virtual photographers like us. But to give you a more practical example, which can be done right now, as is with the beta, which is fantastic, that you are able to create previs animations. We are doing a lot of animations in Brick Visual, and this is always struggling having the viewport sequences and talking with using the viewport sequences in the client communication, and that's Lavina is good for, especially with the script which allows the animated cameras import to 3D Studio Max, that you can able to create animations quickly in Lavina. I have to mention over here that the movie that I made with Lavina was a good example of that, and that was the first point when I was surprised that the quality is so good that it can be kind of a mid-quality end product as well. So I made some rules for myself when I create the animation, and those rules were that kind like having a frame maximum 5 minutes render time, so in 4K. So of course, I use RTX 6000, which is an advantage, but again, it was surprising how quick Lavina was able to render out a high-quality animation.
Attila, thanks so much for sharing, your insights with everyone, and we're certainly excited about where Lavina is headed in the future too. I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my screen. I just want to show everybody the link where they can download the beta, and we will have time to take a few questions. Hopefully Simeon is still with us so that he can answer some of the more technical ones. So
yeah, absolutely.
The first thing that I want to tell everybody is that, if you want to join the beta, you can do that today. You can go to chaosgroup.com/Lavina. The video that Attila was just mentioning is actually right there on the page. You can see the animations that he and the team have done already in Lavina, and there's a pretty cool comparison to what they rendered out of Lavina in a few minutes a frame and what they rendered out originally from the finals in V-Ray. So that's actually one of the questions in the chat. There's a few people that are wondering, like, well, with Lavina, do you still need V-Ray? And the answer is still yes. There are limitations to what you can do with real-time ray tracing. The quality is quite good, and it's amazing what you can get out of the box. But there are some limitations to what you can do with the shading and so on. And when you really want that final finished quality, that's where V-Ray comes in. But the idea behind it is that you can use these tools together. You can use Lavina as a way to explore your scene, introduce camera angles, set up lighting, create that pre-visualization, get maybe client or team sign off on it, and then send it all back to the final frame and render that out of V-Ray, for the finished images. Simeon, is a question for you. Some folks were wondering, what you need to use Lavina in terms of your operating system and your hardware. Maybe you could describe that really quick.
Yeah. Well, Lavina is based on the DXR and the DXR ray tracing API from Microsoft, which currently is supported exclusively on NVIDIA graphics cards from the latest generation RTX, the RTX generation. So this is more or less the biggest entry limitation that you need to meet, or the entry requirement. So if you have one of those graphics cards, this means that or Lavina can utilize the hardware ray tracing cores in the graphics cards and ray trace really fast. Although we support lower previous generations, such as the 1080 Ti, it's very recommended. I can't stress enough the importance of the ray tracing cores, because the performance is really multiples, in the difference of multiples. So I would strongly suggest getting an RTX graphics card if you want to try and make the most out of Lavina. Additionally, since Lavina is a ray tracer, it can handle a lot of polygons, a lot of data, but you still have to fit this on the memory. So depending on the size of your project, you might want to consider a graphics card with more memory rather than smaller amounts. And for example, this is a really good point where, for example, a Quadro may be utilized, because they have really enormous amounts of memory. Of course, this is a recommendation, not a requirement. We've done a lot of optimizations in order to try and shrink the memory needed to render scenes and to fit geometric detail on the graphics card. So we did whatever we can, and we're going to improve that as well. I saw a question about out-of-core technology. Yes, we are considering that as well, although it will have a performance hit. We are investigating in all of the ways to make Lavina more accessible to a lot of devices. As far as another recommendation is, you should always have more system memory than the GPU memory, because otherwise, because the assets have to be processed first from the CPU and then swapped on the GPU. So you can see a huge performance hit if, for example, you have lower memory than the graphics cards on the CPU. And finally, Lavina only works on Windows, and it does on Windows 10, and it requires the latest, or so it's not latest anymore, but a somewhat later edition. The required version is 1809, the update version of Windows, which includes the DXR API as an update. But anything later than that would also work. And also a specific driver version for NVIDIA currently is a requirement. The one that it's I can't remember the exact version, but I think it was 440.61 or something else. Basically, if you're using the latest driver, you should be good to go. One addition here. We had a minor glitch with the latest driver, which we fixed today. So there is a hotfix. So if there are users that are already using Lavina now and had a problem with this driver, please do update your version from the download section. It's available now. And I think these are all the requirements that we currently have.
Yeah, and we have, to double check on all those things, when you go to chaosgroup.com/Lavina to sign up for the beta, we have the hardware requirements on there so that it'll help you walk through some of that. I did see a couple of questions here, Simeon, about the support for multi GPUs, and at the moment we can support 2 GPUs simultaneously with decent scaling. Is that about right?
Yes, this is absolutely correct. Depending on the project and actually on the scene, on the exact viewpoint that you're rendering, the scaling could be becomes almost 2 times. So we have a pretty good utilization of the 2 graphics cards. But again, it's somewhat independent, so it may go down in some cases. To somewhat about 70% faster than compared to a 1 graphics card, and we are and this is an important part here is that currently you need to have NVLink disabled in order for both of the cards to work. So this an important thing that you should note. But we're working on all of these things and improve that. Obviously, support more than 2 graphics cards, scale them better. I mean, we do support them now as well, but internally, and we would like to make the scaling a bit better, and then release that as a support.
Couple more questions, Simeon. Some people were wondering what can be animated. I mean, we saw you animate cameras, of course, and we saw Attila bring in the animated transforms on the Lego Calatrava building. Maybe you could talk to us about what you can animate and what our ideas are there.
Right. Well, animation exported from the DCC in the VR scene is supported 100%. So whatever was animated in the creation tool is going to be included in the file. with the exception of multiple cameras, that is. So that would be placed on the bottom layer that I talked about in the animation editor, and it will be baked, so to speak. But you wouldn't be able to manipulate that animation yet. We are working towards a more robust and more flexible animation editor, but at the time being, you can only create and animate customly or in a custom manner in Lavina only cameras at this point, and you could combine them with the existing scene animation. So for example, if you have cars or people walking around and the trees moving around, this animation done in let's say 3ds Max for the sake of example, you bake this in the VRC and import it, and then you just direct find your cameras and make your shots in Lavina on the blue layer, the one on top of that. You can combine both the animations, but you cannot edit the original ones yet. And in Lavina, currently you can't create animations for objects. So for example, if you want to animate the sun, you can't do that yet. But of course, this is going to be improved, and this is on our roadmap.
Great, thanks for that. We had a couple of questions too, still on the animation topic. Some people were wondering how long it takes to render out the images. And I think Attila mentioned that the images that they rendered from Lavina that they used for their movie that you can see on the chaosgroup.com/Lavina page, he limited those to 5 minutes and they were 4K frames. So it depends on the number of samples that you use and the resolution, but from our experience, it can be a range from a couple of seconds to a few minutes. So it's pretty darn fast to be able to kick out an entire sequence. Other people were wondering too what kind of files you can save out of it, and maybe Simeon, you could just talk about what the file types are that you can render with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly add on what Attila mentioned and what you here just shared, and that is we added the adaptive sampling quite a few versions after Brick were able to render their videos, so they didn't have access to that, which actually increases rendering speed for production. That is quite a lot, and now these 5 minutes will either give you actually these 5 minutes will be much less. Probably I'm of course wild guessing here, but maybe 40% less. So something like 3 minutes for 4K image. And again, we're talking about production quality. You can speed up the rendering if, for example, you want to make just a quick previs. You can tune up the denoiser and limit the rendering per frame to, let's say, 10 seconds, and you will get somewhat decent images, of course, heavily denoised ones. But you will get the quality that I got during the webinar demonstration because it was rendering just for a few milliseconds, and Lavina is built in a way that you can you can scale your renderings for depending on how much time do you have and what the condition is. So you can go really fast, real time, or production wise at the cost of several minutes, or a few minutes, I should say now, with the adaptive sampling. So so that being said, getting back on the file types, currently we output only PNG sequences and PNG files, and we know that customers would like to get different selection of other file types, but that was the first intention, because we have some plans for the HDR image support. I probably we're going to go with EXRs, but that would also I can immediately guess the next question, and that would be what type of render elements or AOVs are going to be supported, and because we don't have many of those at the moment, it will take some time for us to expose other file formats. So NPNG being lossless file format, we picked that as a start.
Great. So I think that about wraps it up for us. I want to thank Attila for joining us. Thank you, Attila. Thank you, Simeon, for your demo and walking us through Lavina. Thanks everybody for tuning in to the webinar. Again, if you're interested, you want to check out the beta, there's the link, chaosgroup.com/Lavina. And I'm going to answer the last question and then sign off. And that is, what does Lavina mean? And as far as I know, Lavina is the Bulgarian word for avalanche. Is that right, Simeon?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
Great. So it's sort of an avalanche of rays that that are rendering your scene. Thanks again, everybody, for joining, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.